Nathan here from Colorado Springs Bourbon Society. I'm Paul, owner of 13th Century Whiskey and Private Label Distillery. So we got a few of our new releases here. We got a Bourbon Reserve that we just came up with. It's oldest barrels that we have, a blend of 7, 8, 9-year-old barrels, char levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. The mash bill on the bourbon is going to be about 85% corn, 10% rye, and 5% malted barley. And we also have our Bourbon Reserve that we bottled about 6 months ago. It's going to be chars 2, 4, and 5 on the barrels, 95.5 on the mash bill. And then again, it's a blend of 6 and 7-year-old barrels. Both of these are coming in around 141 proof. So they're both about the same proof. So you said you wanted to do the rye to start, you think?
Sure. Right. This is the rye, this is the bourbon.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do it. It should be noted we're 40 feet up, sitting on top of barrels.
Yeah, we got about 175 barrels right underneath us. And we're about 40 feet up. Just that the capacity is a little tricky getting up here at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, but why not, you know? Yeah, both of these are going to be a hazmat. I've kind of been mulling through the inventory over the years, and after these get about 6 years old in the 30-gallon barrels, the proof goes up to about 140. The 9-year-old, one of the barrels we dumped in here was from 2015. It came out at 152 proof.
Woo.
But when we blend them all together with the different years and stuff, it's I think it's the best place to go with this type of inventory.
So viscous. So dark.
Yeah, there's no colors in there. There's a mash and drum we were talking to, and he's like all joking. He's like, "Oh, how much color are you putting into that?" I'm like, "We don't bother."
No color, buddy.
Don't make me come over there.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thanks for coming over.
Smells very sweet. You can definitely smell that rye.
Yeah, it's definitely to have a sip of it. Think about it for a little bit. It's not really a sip in between each conversation when you're talking about it. It's kind of a sip, ponder, really go to town on it.
So sweet, so oily.
Yeah. These 30-gallon barrels, I mean, they start to get good at 4 years and competitive with stuff is maybe the 6-7 year mark on the 53s. But when you get them up to 6-7 years, it's just a massive difference. And I think it's really competitive with, we tasted a lot of just single barrels in different chars, and it was so great just to see the difference between the char levels, even with the same mash bill, and the fact that it's aged in Colorado the whole life. It's not just sitting somewhere else and then brought in at the last minute. So
I like how sweet it hits you right away, and then even as you swallow it, it stays super sweet. Little burn on the tip of the tongue and the throat, but not like at 140 I'd expect to be a little bit on fire, and I'm not at all.
Yeah, it seems to drink, I'd say maybe drinks at like 115, 120. Still tons of flavor, mouthfeel. I mean, I'm finally happy that I'm onto something, because when I was doing this many 30-gallon barrels, a lot of people said, well, you're just going to ruin a lot of whiskey. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not.
You're not ruining any of this whiskey.
No. So.
And there's a lot of controversy when you start putting things into smaller barrels. You're trying to super age it, and it's really 30 to 52's not a ton of difference.
No, and it's actually about 20% more expensive to age in the 30-gallon barrels.
Really?
Just because the cost for a 30-gallon barrel is going to be about $365. Cost for a 53-gallon barrel is about $480. So your cost per gallon is quite a bit more expensive.
Much more.
Yeah.
I would tell you that if I didn't know this was a rye, I would think it was just a high rye bourbon. It has all the rye notes, but as a bourbon guy, not a rye guy, it's not that it gets washed out, but that spicy rye is there, but it's not overpowering. I think rye drinkers and bourbon drinkers would like this both.
Yeah, I've heard the similar comments, and I agree completely. If you're a bourbon drinker, this is not going to turn you off. And I've actually had a couple people that tried it recently say that it really turned them on to ryes.
Yeah.
Where before they didn't even like them.
Oh yeah. I tend to stick to the high corn rye, the barely legal ryes, but this guy here I would not tell you it was 140, and I wouldn't even tell you immediately that it was a rye. You can smell the rye as an obvious note. As the first thing, I don't really smell the corn. I don't smell a lot of char on it, but when you taste it, it's definitely a rye, and then you swallow it and you're like, oh, this is a comfortable, sweet, approachable rye.
Yeah, we still have the price point on this. It's $89.99 for the Rye Reserve, so it'll be like that for this year and possibly next year. But I was really trying to get a good balance where the price, the quality, is competitive with other things in the market. So
and will it come in the still bottle?
Yeah. The Rye Reserve will come in the still bottle, and the Bourbon Reserve will come in the barrel bottle. And then we have a couple other. We're doing a football bottle that's coming out probably 2025, and we got the corn cob bottle, and we're doing a fish and game collection that's going to have a elk in there, and we got a falcon that's coming out as well.
Fitting for Air Force.
Yep. And this is the first attempt at a mountain. It needs a little bit of love, but that's the first attempt. So,
one thing that I love with the barrel in the bottle, and I think I told you before, is the tasting glens, the smaller glens fit right in there.
Yep.
And when I've had people at the house and I lift it up and they see that there's a Glencairn underneath it, everyone trips out. They're like, oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, we're doing a double oaked product.
Oh, nice.
It's going to come out next year, and we're putting a barrel inside a bottle.
Oh my gosh.
So there'll be another little smaller barrel inside.
Nice.
Just to kind of go for the double oaked.
Yeah.
I thought that would be the factory looked at me and they're like, that's freaking ridiculous. Yeah. That's going to take us years, but hopefully in another 6 months we'll have the double oaked come out, and that'll be awesome. Nice little release later on this year, November, December. So
yeah, this is just very beautiful, very smooth. The alcohol doesn't wash out any of the aroma. It's still very grassy, herby, a tiny bit of spearmint, but not overpowering like I get in a lot of ryes. And then it's like brown sugar, caramel corn. It just smells so nice.
Yeah, I've even tried it with a little bit of water, and I prefer it just neat as is. It does open up a little bit different flavor profile, but I really like that high proof barrel stuff, and it almost seems like a crime to add water to it, to me personally. But
yeah, let me just add a cap and see what it changes.
Yeah, I think I'll do the same thing.
Some people think that's pretty hot and they don't want to think on it, but see if changing it.
Yeah, and I will note this bottle's been open for about a month. Okay. So we did try it like right when it was first bottled, but after it was sitting and open for a month, it really helped. Yeah, helped quite a bit. So
I'm not getting any new notes on it. Maybe a tiny bit of cola, but it doesn't dramatically change it. Definitely got sweeter. Mm-hmm. Not that it wasn't already pretty sweet as is. It definitely got sweeter. I think it washed out a little bit of the rye flavor, though. It didn't enhance it for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I'm not sure what it is exactly about it, but I just kind of prefer it with the straight out of the bottle. And it does help if it's been open for a couple weeks, but still delicious.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I gotta prefer it before.
Yeah.
Personally, yeah.
I think it made it sweeter, but it made it more bitter. Mm-hmm. Like the side of my tongue was coated more oily, actually almost like a molasses on the side of the tongue, and now it's bitter on the tongue, only sweet down the middle, and somehow it actually got a little hotter. I don't know why. Why would it have gotten hotter?
I don't know.
Still delicious, but it actually seems hotter watered down.
Well, when I was doing the Bourbon Reserve, it was the same thing. Like we tried it before and after the water, and we're just like, no,
don't add the water to it.
Yeah, and I know that's kind of an exception to the rule in general, but
there. So let's try the bourbon, and then we can always come back to this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is kind of the peak of this inventory. I mean, some of these are up to 9 years old, and after 9 years old, they just don't change a ton from year after year, like from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9.
Yeah.
Once you get past that 9-year mark, I'm just not getting a lot of difference in the 30-gallon barrel. It starts off with 30 gallons,
Yeah.
and after 9 years, we're getting like 12.
There's a lot of angel share in that.
There's a little bit much on the angel share side, so it's kind of, I don't think I'll ever have anything come out older than.
Yeah, for me, the sweet spot with a lot of bourbons tend to be 7 and 9 years, 10 included, and then oftentimes an 11 to 13 year. It doesn't get any better, and then usually around the 14 year, you either destroy it and you've wasted all your money, or it's one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. And I've had plenty of 13, 14, 15 year whiskeys that some of them were just over the top exceptional, and then some of them were just
A wreck.
trash. Yeah. But even we've released several barrels in that 5 to 9 year range, and that's just like a nice sweet spot. It's so approachable, it's so delicious, and when you blend it with a 9 year, you can kind of get rid of some of that young youth that some of the 5, 6 year have. Even if they're still good at 5 and 6, you can still taste that youth, but that 9 year kind of softens the edges on it a little bit.
Yeah, with the reserve, I don't plan on having anything younger than 6 years in there, and then up to 9 years is the.
It's a good sweet spot.
I think, especially at the 30-gallon barrels, because comparatively speaking, it's going to be close to like a 13, 14 year old.
And look how rich that is. I mean, I don't know that you can appreciate how rich that is. It's dang near the color of a dark brown cork here.
Yeah, I think with the surface area we get with, and I even have some, we're doing some experimental barrels where we actually groove, kind of like the Sinatra series, like with Jack Daniel, we're actually like grooving some of the inside to give it even more surface area. But I'm only doing a couple of them because I'm worried it's going to be too much.
Oh yeah.
So it's already at the 30-gallon it's already kind of at its sweet spot, I think. So I don't plan on doing, but you got to experiment and keep on trying.
With that Makers series where they do the stave, when you pick a barrel, they give you the staves, and so you can see all the different ones. And a lot of those French ones and a lot of those dark chocolate ones, they're all grooved to try to add that color in there. But I don't know that more surface area is needed when it's already been perfected on a smooth.
Yeah, I think it's about
the char makes the difference.
Yeah, and we don't use any really 15 or 10-gallon barrels. I just experimented with all the way up to some custom 200-gallon back when I set it up in 2013.
Like those old wine barrels.
Well, we had custom like new oak barrels made that were 200
gallons,
and it's just moving them around, and it felt like they needed like 25, 30 years to really get anywhere. So I did one of those, and we got 2 years into it. We were just like, no, and we took it out and put it in 30-gallon barrels and just continued it. But I definitely played around with all the sizes. So.
Now that we have the bourbon in the glass, this is all rye. Like now with the side-by-side, it definitely, I could discern this was rye, but like I said, if you poured it to me blind, I wouldn't immediately say rye. But now that you've got it next to a bourbon, you can definitely pick up the much stronger rye notes to it. And this one, you can smell the corn. You can smell a little bit more of the oak that I couldn't on the rye. Glad we started with the rye. That is quite discernible difference.
Man, I really like that. That goes for a good 3-4 seconds. Just keeps on going. I got a little bit of spice at the end there, sweet. Yeah, that is
so different and so beautiful. It just hits a lot of the correct notes for a bourbon drinker. That is just sweet for days. I mean, a tiny bit of bitter on the front and a tiny bit of bitter on the back, but the rye bitter, not in a negative way. And just that viscosity it just coats your whole mouth. I'm drooling here. That's
the drooling. The
drooling is a positive note. I appreciate.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're finally able to you've been tasting over the last couple of years, and now it's finally at a point where
Yeah.
there's inventory that I'm really proud of, and that it really brings the points of difference of everything together. So, and this one was the same way. When I added a little bit of water to it, I just
Didn't get better.
did not get better. So, and this one we just cracked it open, so I'm interested to try it another week or two after it's had a little bit of time to breathe. But
And this is not a weeder at all, but
no,
if I was tasting this not knowing what it is, it just has so much smoothness on the palate and the very sweet corn and approachability to it. It definitely drinks a little more like a weeder, and that's not a bad thing. I love weeders, but it has the sweet corn notes with the rye kind of hiding in the back, the malt hiding in the back, and just the delicious viscosity that you want from a good, nice bourbon. Oh yeah, it's even a little bit floral. It's obviously, I've mentioned the sweet notes, a little bit of caramel. It almost smells like a little bit of rose water, but doesn't taste that kind of, those kind of scenarios. It has like rock candy, molasses.
yeah. So this was a 25 barrel blend,
Okay,
and I think about at least 5 or 6 of those barrels are char too.
okay.
So I think that's where some of the floral,
Yeah.
some of the lighter notes are coming. There's a couple char 5s in there, 3 or 4 char 5s. The majority of it's char 3, probably 10 barrels, and then the rest of it's char 4.
And with just the beauty of the glassware, the time and attention you've spent with blending all the different ages of whiskey to get it to where it is today, it's just well done. You've done a nice job, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely don't want it to be no, it's just a fancy bottle.
Yeah.
I really think that there's so many whiskeys out there in bourbon. You got to be competitive on every level. So that's why we do a really nice bottle, and then paired with the beautiful whiskey inside. I'm really not trying to go for something that's just, oh, that's a cool bottle, I'll buy it once. I want it to be a special occasion.
Sure.
Buy it a couple times a year. But it's definitely probably not an everyday sipper, but it's definitely something that people can use for those special occasions.
Well, the thing that's difficult about it is, as delicious as this is, it could be an everyday sipper, and it could be dangerous, because at 140, at 100 plus a bottle, being an everyday sipper could turn into a good habit for some.
Yeah, and it's not too bitter either. That's
It's
where
not bitter at all.
I've been trying to be careful with that, because that's the one thing with the smaller barrels. It's very easy to.
I will say adding the water definitely opened up the nose where it didn't as much on the rye. I'm definitely getting more of those floral and barrel notes on it, getting a lot of dried fruit on this, like in a good way, like cherries, cranberries.
Yeah, the first time I tried it, it didn't really improve it, but this time I'm actually enjoying it, a little bit more.
With just a drop of water.
Just a touch of water in there, yeah.
It definitely helped open up the nose.
But also, the last time I tried it was when we just took all 25 barrels, mixed up 50 milliliters of each one, and then tasted them like that. But we actually turned it into a production batch.
Right.
It's a little different.
The water opened up the palate, but it took away some of the finish. So it definitely enhanced the sweetness. It enhanced a little bit of the sugars. But right when you drink it, the finish is there, but it's not lingering like it was before.
Yeah, that's what I really want. Is I want that lingering.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you have a good meal. If you're tasting an experience for like 4 or 5 seconds,
right,
that's the difference between like good and great. The longer you're kind of assimilating all those different profiles. So
I'll say the water, I would definitely, if I was drinking this at home, I would drink half of my pour as is, and then drink it with a little bit of water just to enhance the aroma, but it takes away some of the finish. But no matter what, if you poured this for me blind, there's no way I would tell you that this was 140 proof. There's absolutely no way I would tell you that.
Well, and we do have the density meter downstairs that goes down to 2 decimal points, and we actually distill a sample too, just because when you get in that high proof, it can to some degree affect the density meter.
Okay.
So we just wanted we actually distill a sample too, and they came within a like 0.2% difference from the distilled sample versus the density meter, which is slightly over TTB, tolerance, but the TTP is 0.15.
Okay.
But it's
Still there.
still there, and even as we're filling a batch, the batch is in the tank,
Right.
a little bit of evaporation gets there. So like
Sure.
the first 20 bottles are going to be a little bit different proof than the last 20.
Right.
On a 2,200 bottle batch, we are going to have a slight difference in
Yeah.
proof from the start to the end. But
The variation's still there.
yeah, and that's just, part of, we can only do about 300 bottles a day
Right.
in terms of filling, versus when I do vodkas and other things, we can do 2,000 bottles a day. So
I'm going to see, going back to the rye just to reset. Yeah, now that that rye sat and it has a little bit of water in that, there's no denying this is a rye whiskey.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this side by side, because now that I reset with bourbon and then coming back to the rye, there's no denying this is rye whiskey, whereas before it was like, yeah, if you poured it for me blind, I couldn't immediately tell you that this was a rye whiskey.
mm-hmm.
This is definitely a rye whiskey, but it still hits the bourbon notes that I enjoy, but it hits the rye notes that are supposed to be there. This is just obviously night and day now with rye bourbon, but that rye really enhanced all of the flavors of this bourbon. It brought in, now when I smell it, it sat for a little bit. Yes, there's a few drops of water in there, but all of those floral, sweet, oaky, caramel, even now I'm getting cinnamon, which I didn't have before, and I don't know if it's just because I went from the spicy rye to now the bourbon, but no, it's one of those that when I think of a great bourbon, I think there's, the bourbon that you drink every day that's going to hit a few notes, but you drink it because you just enjoy the flavor of it and it's predictable. And I have my set of bourbons that are exactly that way. Mm-hmm. And then I have another set off to the side that are like, no, I don't want to have just my drinker. I want to have something that's more complex that makes me think about it. Mm-hmm. And this guy definitely changes with time, where if you have a buddy that comes over, like, are we going to sit and have a pour, mm-hmm. or are we going to have a few pours? And this is the sit and have a pour, mull it over, think about it, mm-hmm. have a fresh, clean palate.
Yeah.
Because it just keeps opening up more and more and more, and that viscosity, that thickness, that oily, that chewy that some people talk about, it starts going around the whole mouth, and the sweetness, the spiciness. I grew up chewing juicy fruit, and it was one of those where you get that impact of flavor, mm-hmm. and this starts having that impact of flavor. You're like, oh my gosh, but unlike juicy fruit, it sits and lingers and lingers and lingers, and it sits there. But if I was going to describe a Kentucky, well, we should describe it as a Colorado hug, not a Kentucky hug, since we're in Colorado.
Yeah, it is.
It's not, it's there, but it's just, it's not something that if someone's coming over to the house and I'm like, do you want to try a hazmat here? The things that it conjures up in people's heads are like, oh, I'm just going to be burnt out. I'm going to be ruined for the rest of the night. That's not what this does. This sits with you. I can appreciate it. It keeps coming and coming. And then it goes away in a nice, sweet flavor around the whole mouth that I really enjoy, as opposed to I've had several hazmats that you're like, all right, we're just getting blasted here. Let's just call it, you finish the night, or you're not having anything else. And that's not what this is. I wouldn't even, I love the hazmat aspect of it, and a lot of people love that, but I wouldn't even think for a minute. I would put this in the 115, 120, kind of as you said earlier, range, not 140 range.
Yeah, and I think definitely if you have a lot of stuff, if it's over 130, the alcohol just kind of takes over.
Yeah, that's all it does.
And it doesn't do that in this situation. And if it did, I wouldn't release it like that. I'd proof it down and I'd adjust it. But after a lot of back and forth, I really just think keeping it at the high proof is where it belongs.
And I think, unlike with the rye, because there's a lot of people, even folks that drink regular whiskey somewhere in the 80 to 110 proof, will still add some water to it just because mm-hmm. that's what they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. The rye, adding water didn't do anything to it. Adding water to the bourbon after having it opened up opened up the aroma, but it didn't add to the taste.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people that like drinking whiskey neat with no added water will love it no matter what.
Yep.
And people that like adding a little water to it will also love it. It doesn't, you know, I have some friends that I'll add water to my whiskey when they do, just to see what they're getting, and it usually dilutes it and waters it down, and I don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is delicious as is, and then adding a little water for those folks that enjoy it, they'll also be pleased.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really want to try it in an old fashioned too, because I think it's just all that flavor is
Right.
gonna get in there, and it's gonna be really good for, you know, simple cocktails. I
Right.
wouldn't do too much to play with it, but you know, I think the right cocktails with maybe one or two ingredients,
Oh, sure.
it's gonna do really well in that aspect too.
I'd make this as an old fashioned, but just add the whiskey.
Just
Maybe a cherry on the side.
yeah. We don't need a ton of grenadine.
An orange peel in a salad.
Yeah, there you go. That's all it needs is the orange peel. It's not an old fashioned at this point. It's whiskey with an orange peel.
That's right. Well, I'm very pleased that we had this opportunity. Thank you again, Paul. I mean, it's definitely, you know, it's not even one of those whiskeys that's so complex, where I've had a lot of times where I've even described it myself when doing reviews, like this is a thinker. Like you got to put some energy into this. This isn't a thinker. This is just, it's exactly what you want. It's exactly where it should be. It tastes delicious. Don't drink it fast, because you're just wasting your time on it.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to some of those where you're like, oh, I'm getting this whiskey and it's a thinker. I got to spend 45 minutes just pondering it. That's not what this is. And even the glass is empty. I mean, this is a rye all day long, and this is a bourbon all day long. And if I was trying to tell someone, here's a difference between a rye and a bourbon,
Mm-hmm.
serving them an empty glass of this, you know, after it's already had it, and be like, smell this now. Now we're going to drink a rye. Smell this now. Now we're going to drink a bourbon. It has all the flavor still in the glass. It's so viscous. It's still got legs on the glass, empty.
Yeah, I'm super happy with where it finally turned out. I mean, it's a little bit it was kind of stressful, because at the 3-4 year mark, you kind of get like the pressure to get something out there. And I will have, you know, some 4-year-old stuff that'll be the everyday SKUs and stuff. But I think the majority of the inventory I'm just going to keep for this higher proof and let it go at least, you know, 6, 7, 8 years. And I don't think much else really needs to be done.
And that's the hard part as a business owner. And a lot of people fall into this trap where you're like, dang, I've already invested so much time and so much money into this. Even though it's not what I would like it to be, I have to sell this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know with other companies in Colorado, I tasted their whiskey years ago when it was 3, 4, and 5 years old, and talked to owners, and in the most respectful way that I could, said that it was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's 10, 11, 12, it's like, okay, you're almost finally onto something. You haven't done that. You've taken the time to let it sit, let it mature, let it get to where it needs to be. And I'm not trying to stroke you here.
No, you wouldn't do that. I know you. I know you better than that. So.
You really taken the time to get it to where it needs to be. I'm so proud of you, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't in a position where it's the distillery's private label distillery.
Yep.
So I was really just focusing on doing, you know, private labels for other companies, and I was able to sit back and, you know, let the inventory get to a point where it should be. And now, you know, it's not going to be like, oh, a ton of it. I'll probably only have a couple thousand bottles of the reserve, you know, every year. But as the inventory matures, there'll be more of it. And I'm just pretty dead set in letting all of it get to that, you know, at least 90% of it get to that 6-7 year point, and then turning it into the reserve, because it's great as the reserve. It's good, you know, at the 4 year mark, but I'd rather be known for greatness than just, you know, good.
After the bourbon, now I could tell you that it was a rye. Maybe it was just my fresh palate couldn't discern, but this is a rye that I would still drink.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, you know, that's the hard part is some people are rye drinkers that will also drink bourbon. Some people are bourbon drinkers that will occasionally drink rye. It took me 2 to 3 years to even drink a rye that I didn't hate. There's a couple companies out there with that 51-52% mash bill of rye, so it's like I can cheat my brain to think it's a bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
but this is a rye through and through, and this is a very, very approachable rye.
Yeah, I honestly, but the 4 year mark, I wasn't in love with it, but at this older, and I've never really been a big rye drinker personally. I've always been on the bourbon side, but this rye at that, that 6-7 year mark, it's definitely has the notes of a bourbon. So it does,
but when you smell it, you're like, nope, I'm drinking a rye today, and then you taste it, but it's
right up front too. I get like the rye, the spice, like not the first thing, but like the second.
Yep.
That's where I can tell it separates for me.
It coats that. It coats the palate with the sweetness just all the way through, which is hard with a lot of the ryes. And even buddies that I have that are rye drinkers, they don't like a sweetness. They want it to be, I don't know, all peppermint and grass and dirt and whatever it is that they enjoy about that rye.
Mm-hmm.
But this one hits you with the sweetness and then finishes with the spicy ryeness.
Mm-hmm.
So as a bourbon drinker, it hits me where I want to be, and then it finishes with a rye. I think even with rye drinkers, on the nose, they'll pick up that rye immediately, go, oh, it's a little bit sweet. Oh, but when I swallow it, it's all that rye that I want to have in the rye.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm really interested. I got the American single malt that we put that away in 2019. So that'll be at 5 years, but I'm going to wait at least another year or two and then do a single malt reserve. And I'm excited to see how that changes, because I really like the single malts quite a bit with the smoky aspects and whatnot. So, but it does have a lot of grass in the single malts for sure, which some people can, turn off. But
it took me many, 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 many years to find a single malt that I could even palate.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I realized is that it was that peatiness. And even when I was in Scotland, I was at a place and it was try this, try this, try this, try this. And I just left and I was like, I love your country. I love your people. You're amazing. I love everything about this place, except I can't drink the whiskey.
Well, I can't. The peated stuff, I can't really get into either. And that's what I like about the American single malt. Yep. There's no peat in there at all. I experimented a little bit with that, and I personally can't. I think if you want peat, you need to go to Scotch single malt. But with the American single malt, that just really focuses on that smokiness.
Yep.
And then you get some of the other vanilla caramel, grassy notes, earthy notes in there too. So I'm super excited to see how that turns out in 2016, 2017.
It took the thing I had to finally appreciate with the single malts was the citrus, the green apple, the bright fruit flavors that I was able to finally tune my palate to on the single malts.
Mm-hmm.
That initially just was bitter.
Mm-hmm.
That over time I was like, oh, I get what you're doing here. You're putting a bright whiskey into a bottle. This isn't a deep, dark whiskey. This is a bright whiskey. At least with most of the American single malts, it was like, oh, I get what I finally get what's happening here. It wasn't initially what I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always kind of preferred the American single malt, just personally, and I'm excited to see what it matures into in another year or two.
The finish is nice. This is the kind of thing where I've had a long day at work. I'm done with my day. I've done all my responsibilities, and I'm going to sit down and have a pour for an hour, one pour, and this is the one I'm going to drink right here.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I'm excited about it. I finally, so much risk and so many, naysayers, and initially, you're trying to cut corners and do different things, but it's after doing the original experiments with it, like I can see where the 5, 10s, those are, even the 15s, I think if they don't go too long, you got to really time those like down to the exact month or you're going to wreck them. But with these 30 gallons, I really just happy that I have the largest inventory of 30-gallon barrels in the country. Oh yeah. Right in Garrison Brothers in Texas is right after that. But they use a lot of 20s and 22s.
But these are also the people that think bourbon can only be made in Kentucky. Like bourbon can only be, and you're not expanding your brain to all these other things. And being in Colorado, home of the craft brewery movement, we obviously have a lot of distilleries that want to do the same, and putting them on par is different. It's not apples to apples here.
No, I think Colorado has a really unique, aging environment with the climate and the dryness. I honestly, I don't think I'd age a lot of whiskey in Florida or in California where you only get, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. Yeah. But I think, and I do have a pretty big loss. I mean, after 4 years for 30 gallons, we're down to 24. and then at 9 years we're down to 12.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I'm gonna have any barrels that get past 15. I'll keep one.
Let's be empty.
Well, yeah, because they're coming. Well, that's what happens when you have those 53s.
Yep.
You know, after 25, 30 years, you have like a gallon or two.
Yep.
And I just see those sell for like, you know, millions of dollars,
yeah.
and I'm just like, ouch.
The only experience I had with Florida that was good was distilled in Indiana, then aged in Indiana, then taken to Florida for a few years, and then brought to Colorado for a couple years, and that turned into dark mud whiskey that was just phenomenal. We got a 62 bottle yield on a barrel.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was phenomenal, just amazing.
Mm.
But when you have a 62 bottle yield on a 53 gallon barrel, that's not cost effective.
No, and well, it's, you know, if you want to be in that, you know, $400 or $500 price range,
And these we put out at $60.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's a in that case.
No one made money.
No.
But it was amazing.
No, that's. I mean, I don't see once a year doing something like that. Like, maybe get back together and do that fuck cancer barrel. You know, get something going with that, because I still have about 25, 30 of these older barrels.
Right.
I'm glad I didn't really try to do too much over the last couple of years, because I've been a little bit in Colorado and Nebraska, but I really wanted to get some of the inventory up to where I originally thought it would be superior. It was, you know, good. No, it's there, and that's great.
You're there, dude.
It's there. Rye Reserve, Bourbon Reserve.
Yep.